Good day, sir. Good day, everyone. So we are Group 6, and now we will tackle the topic about information technology architecture concepts. So my co-reporters are Carla Marie Iñigo, Larry S. Langguay, and yours truly, Mark Vincent Larita. So what is information technology architecture? An IT architect is like a plan for a city. It lays out the street network, water system, sewer system, emergency service, and power grids. It is the basic framework for all the computer systems and information management that support organizational services. So like a city plan, an IT architecture is complex. So um, the more different technology that we use, the more complex the IT architecture is. So what does IT architecture look like? The IT architecture is an organized set of consensus decisions. When we say consensus decisions, this is a general agreement on policies and principles, services, and common solutions, standards and guidelines, as well as specific vendor products used by IT providers both inside and outside the information technology branch. One of the major activities associated with producing an IT architecture will be process of achieving such consensus decision. So therefore, in every decision that will be made, it should be undergo in a consensus decision or a general agreement. It is understood that reaching consensus may constrain purchase and decision options. Hopefully, in the interest of enhancing inter interoperability, when you say interoperability, it is the ability of the computer systems or software to exchange and make use of information. So it is a given that the greater the consensus achieved, the greater the organizational benefits attained. So what are the IT architecture objectives? So there are 6 IT architecture objectives. So first is that architectural decisions should serve the department's mission. The architecture serves heterogeneous environment. So when we say heterogeneous, it is versatile or universal environment. The greater the consensus achieved for individual architectural decisions, the greater the benefit. The architecture should identify areas of stability without impeding essential innovation. So therefore, the architecture should know where the areas are stagnant or not progressing without impeding or delaying the essential innovation or those extremely important innovation. Architectural decisions should describe the tangible result of conformance and non-conformance with architecture. Architectural decisions should provide sufficient documents. When we say sufficient documents, it should have complete or um, complete documentation to assess the compliance of a specific implementation. So purpose of the IT architecture: to guide the process of planning, acquiring, building, modifying, interfacing, and deploying IT resources throughout the department. As, as such, the IT architecture should offer a means of stable evolution by identifying technologies that work together to satisfy the needs of department user.
Architectural viewpoints. The architectural choices and decisions made and reflected in a viewpoints model are all related back to the business requirements. and how many other tactical and strategic inputs that shaped an IT architecture. It should be noted that the IT architecture is in effect defining further constraints and requirements of a decision and made at a lower level. Architectural viewpoints is kanang isa na siya ka process or concept sa architecture nga naga-tan-aw in a very different viewpoints like on how to implement the architecture or design of application or any software. In architecture, as note is described to a number of different architectural viewpoints that are arranged in perspective. Each viewpoint shows that IT architecturally from a particular aspect, the set of specific associated aspect kanila business perspective and IT architecture viewpoints, din mo siya makita or din mo siya di ba din mo siya is kanang i-consider ang perspective sa business you design architect as design as an super architect and also in a system model na siya mga part para makita nimo unsay side sa dali sa model sa imong i-design sa isa ka software din ang technology model sa isa na siya ka aspect. In business perspective, this you can see that there are business entities model, business process model, or business location model, and business roles model. Kinahanglan mo siya i-consider in a business perspective. Ibali kanang sa perspective sa business, did mo siya mahibawan unsa ang yang entities model, tanan siya process model, location model, and rules model. Unya makita na to ang bali in graphics para pasabta din na to. First is that we will see how many perspectives. Next is the system models. Then it is a platform independent models. And system models there are logical data model, logical process model, logical system model, and logical roles model. Kani siya dapat nimo mahibawaan sa system model. Dapat na siya ang upat po in the system model viewpoints. Next is technology model. In technology model, there is physical data model, physical process model, and physical system model, physical roles model. Kani siya ang ibali part sa technology model. Next is when developing an IT architecture, each of these three collections of models perspective is defined. Tara, mo na siya ang makatawang giingon gani halay. This business perspective, dara siya ang business entity model na nakapaloob na siya sa data. Atong basahan di is this perspective in horizontal collection of viewpoints and in an aspect is the vertical collection na siya dire. Tari na ito makita sa business ang activity in a business is a business process model. Then sa logical ang activity is logical process model. Nadyo na siya di bali their process means their activity. And in locations, there are technical locations, technical process, logical roles model, and ano siya atong makita sa architectural viewpoint. Architectural focus. Also, these viewpoints could represent the complete details in design of IT architecture. In all its glory, details is often not critical. Therefore, the architecture concerns itself only with important viewpoints at that level of details. The purpose of the architecture's effort must always be kept in mind. It recommends to only include sa architecture there are things we need to focus. This is the structure. Structure. We need to focus on structure. Important architectural structures are patterns and relationships. Key elements that we need to focus: architectural significance entities, process and locations, and rules. Muna siya ang mga need na to i-focus. In key scenarios, there are 80% rules is good fun to follow. Show the main business processes. Key activities process. Capture the main business activities and the processes. The architectural preconcepts of necessity are abstraction or simplification of system in order to focus and better understand the importance of our characteristics by leaving irrelevant details aside. The important characteristics are those that are assistant in understanding. Diri sa kaning focus is kanang set aside na to ang mga dili importante in our architecture. In immigration, how do we get the current state of future state as defined from architecture, IT architecture? Rural migration is kanang tan-aw nimo ang future, dili siya migration ng balhin, but it means kanang tan-aw nimo ang future ng state sa imong architecture. And patterns and reuse, identification of architecture design patterns and evolution. Non-functional requirements, understanding qualities such as performance, volume, security, and reliability. Partitioning of models related to the first point, who can partition an IT system to aid an migration management and implementation. Architectural decision and the key objective of IT architecture is to make decisions required by decisions and discover the best made with the help to find the actual views. And in context, they are related to placing task, process, and related system into a larger context, aids in a better understanding the system and a constant place upon its context. And this is there is where we focused in architecture.
Architectural patterns. Architectural patterns are ready-made structures or solutions that solve recurring architectural problems. An architectural framework or an architectural infrastructure or middleware is a set of components on which you can build a certain kind of architecture. Many architecture patterns exist that provide a structure for particular aspects of the enterprise architecture. Next is architectural patterns are similar to design patterns. But since the context is IT architecture, the focus is more on form, structure, rather than detailed design, specification, and function. According to Fowler 1987, an architectural patterns is defined as an idea that has been useful in one particular context and will probably be useful in others. In short, architectural patterns focus on the form of the solutions. There are 7 architectural frameworks currently exist. First is the client-server. Client-server is a distributed application structure in computing that partitions tasks or workloads between the providers of a resource or service, called servers, and server requesters, called clients. Next is cloud computing. Cloud computing is a term used to describe a variety of different types of computing concepts that involve a large number of computers connected through a real-time communication network, such as the internet. Third is the distributed computing pattern. Distributed computing pattern is a field of computer science that studies software systems in which components located on network computers communicate and coordinate their actions by passing messages. Fourth is the IT security reference model. IT security architecture typically is a random patchwork of isolated and tactical solutions that solve specific security problems. However, many security problems are neglected due to the complexity and diversity of the security problems and solutions, resulting in the inability to understand the requirements and build overarching enterprise security architecture. Multi-tier architecture. Multi-tier architecture, often referred to as N-tier architecture, is a client-server architecture in which presentation, application processing, and data management functions are logically separated. Service-oriented architecture. Service-oriented architecture is a software design and software architecture design pattern based on discrete pieces of software providing application functionality as services to other applications. Peer-to-peer architecture. Peer-to-peer is a type of decentralized and distributed network architecture in which individual nodes in the network called peers act as both suppliers and consumers of resources. In contrast to the centralized client-server model, where client nodes request access to resources provided by the central servers. Architectural perspective languages. UAM IT architecture viewpoints, and in fact, each perspective has a viewpoint language specified, which defines the generic modeling elements allowed the meta model to be used for modeling the viewpoint. So there are three types of perspective languages. There are three types of perspective languages: business perspective language, logical perspective language, and technical perspective language. First is the business perspective. The business perspective language is based upon a very small subset of BPMN. BPMN is short for Business Process Model and Notation. With the addition of business entities, business locations, and business source elements. Next is logical perspective. The logical perspective language is based upon the BPMN descriptive conformance subclass elements and attributes, with the addition of untyped throwing event, think events, catch and throw, message, send and receive, and send and receive task elements. This conformance profile is used for logical level business process modeling in UAM, as required by the context and objective of the architecture effort. However, the UAM methodology have some specific accommodation on how to use the profile. The last type of perspective language is the technical perspective. The technical perspective defines the technical level view of the system. The various models defined show how people interact with processes at various locations within the system and the things they handle and use, technically the entities. So technical perspective, patterns for their usage may be defined. And that is our topic for this subject, the IT architecture concepts. We have an activity ready for you to answer the questions on what have you learned in our reporting. Activity number 1, define architecture in your own understanding. Number 2, what are the sets of perspectives and associated aspects? Number 3, the important characteristics in architectural focuses are. Number 4, there are 7 architectural frameworks currently exist. What are those? And number 5, what are the 3 perspective languages?